Okay guys, let's get started. Internet security is more important than ever. Attacks are actually getting more targeted and sophisticated. Custom malware is even created at the customer side. There are a lot more organized attack campaigns. The bad actors are getting smarter and smarter in order to actually attack their victims. Every organization or system is a target. It doesn't matter the size, it doesn't matter the type of organization, and it doesn't matter the country. You are a target. Especially, it is important to recognize that even, yourself, you're a target by just taking this lesson. For example, attackers are always aiming individuals to steal their intellectual property, personal information, and even the source code. Let me give you an example. In today's world, programmers carry their laptops and source code, and in some cases, very sensitive information about the underlying systems in the organizations. The attackers are definitely looking for finding new ways to steal that information. Let's go over some of the recent evolutions of threats. As I mentioned before, even custom malware is being deployed and in some cases created at the victim site. Multiple bad actors can be present in a victim's network simultaneously. So in other words, if you look for bad stuff, you're going to find bad stuff. And in some cases, what we actually have seen is that multiple threat actors are attacking a victim at the same time for different purposes. The attack infrastructure can be used as a platform for the next attack. So in other words, you can use somebody's infrastructure as a stepping stone in order to launch an attack to another organization. Many people are blind to these network malfeasance or to these threats nowadays. And some of them, they're even conceding the loss of control. So in other words, they're actually giving up and looking for non-traditional ways on how to actually protect themselves, such as cybersecurity or cyber insurance and other methods. Another thing is that denial of service can be a precursor to damage in some cases, and is actually used as a distraction for attackers to actually do a little bit more stealth attacks and steal information from the victim site. Undetected communications to even embargo countries are being undetected for quite some time. Now this screen here is representing today's reality. Cisco, along with other external entities, did a study, and we actually found that over 75% of the attacks start stealing information within minutes. Now, over 50% of the attacks are left undetected for months, if they're even detected at all in the customer site. So, one of the things that we want to recognize as security professionals must understand what we're actually trying to protect and from whom. We need to think like the attackers, we need to think as the bad guys, and try to understand all the threats that are happening nowadays. Often criminals know more about your network than you do. The industrialization of hacking is fueling this cyber economy and creating new methods to carry out attacks as business. In this slide, we'll see the evolution of threats and how they grow to more sophisticated attacks every day. From viruses in the 90s to worms in the early 2000s to spyware and rootkits and advanced persistent threats nowadays. Criminals in some cases actually know more about your network than you do. We need to keep this in mind in order to protect our infrastructure more effectively. This is an example of the typical stage of a data breach. The attackers start learning information about your network, how systems can be compromised, and how malware can spread to cause harm to systems in the network to steal data. The attacker not only looks for what systems to compromise in the network, but also what high value data they can actually steal in very non-traditional ways. Let's take a look at what we call the attack continuum, the before, during, and after an attack. We must adopt a threat-centric security model, and that's what we call the attack continuum. Before an attack, security technologies and procedures need to be in place to discover threats and enforce policies and harden the network. During the attack, these technologies must provide ways to detect, block, and defend against these type of threats. No technologies or security products are perfect. Before, during, and after an attack, the network can be used as a sensor, as an enforcer, as a mitigation accelerator. So even after the attack, what we can actually use is the network to contain, to scope, and remediate that attack, and easily react to avoid any data from being extradited from the network. Before we proceed further, let's cover some definitions. The first one is, what is a vulnerability? A vulnerability is an exploitable weaknesses in a system or its design. Vulnerabilities can be found in protocols, operating systems, applications, and system designs. Then you may ask, what is actually a threat? A threat is a potential danger to an asset. If a vulnerability exists and hasn't been exploited, it's what we call that the threat is not yet realized. If an attack takes place or a vulnerability is exploited, then a threat is actually realized, and this is what we actually shown in this screen. Then another definition that we want to actually cover is what is a countermeasure. A countermeasure is a safeguard that somehow mitigates a potential risk. It reduces or eliminates the vulnerability, or at least reduces the likelihood of the threat agent to actually exploit the risk.